Our newscast tonight, yet more evidence emerges that women were systematically forced into sexual slavery by the Japanese military during World War II. This time it's from a U.S. report first presented to Congress back in 2007. President Park Geun Hyes opens the 2014 Nuclear Security Summit with a speech and uses the opportunity to lay out a systematic plan for enhancing nuclear security worldwide. And somber news out of Malaysia, where the Prime Minister announces that Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 ended in catastrophe and that the chances of finding any survivors is near zero. Stay with us for these stories and more.
당신의 유럽은 어디였나요?
Excellence in flight. Korean Air.
It is 5 a.m. in Washington, 10 in The Hague, and 6 on a Tuesday evening here in Seoul. Welcome to Early Edition at 6. I'm Moon Geon-yo.
And I'm Daniel Chan. Thank you for joining us.
Now, a newly surfaced report shows that the United States concluded years ago that women were systematically forced into sexual slavery by the Japanese military during World War II.
It adds more weight to the evidence already out there and stands to further discredit claims out of Japan that coercion was not involved. Our Jung-in starts us off.
This is a report published in 2006 by the National Archives and Records Administration on behalf of the Nazi war crimes and Japanese Imperial government records Interagency working group. Titled Researching Japanese War Crimes, the 222-page report was made after scouring 8.5 million pages of records related to Japanese and Nazi war crimes previously identified by the U.S. government. Included in the report is a description of how the Japanese military contracted private vendors to set up so-called comfort stations for its troops dating back to as early as 1932. The work began in 2000 when Samuel Berger, then National Security Advisor to President Bill Clinton, directed agencies to locate classified records on war crimes committed by agents of the Japanese government from 1931 to 1945. The working group reportedly advised U.S. agencies to pay particular attention to any records and materials related to the Comfort Women program. Comfort women is a term that refers to women and girls forced by the Japanese military to work as prostitutes during World War II. The group sent their findings on to the U.S. Congress in April 2007. Local experts in Korea predict the latest findings may work against the current administration of Shinzo Abe in Japan, which has long been denying that the Comfort Women system involved coercion. Jung-in, Arirang News.
Now, against this backdrop, President Park Geun-hye will sit down with the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe in The Hague in a trilateral summit arranged by U.S. President Barack Obama on Tuesday afternoon local time. This will be the first summit talks between the leaders of Korea and Japan since the two leaders took office in early 2013 and late 2012, respectively. And in The Hague, President Park Geun-hye has kicked off her second day at the Nuclear Security Summit on this Tuesday. The night before, she addressed world leaders gathered for the opening ceremony where she placed emphasis on nuclear security. President Park pointed to North Korea, saying that denuclearization should first start on the Korean peninsula. Our presidential office correspondent Choi Yoo-sun is traveling with the president and filed this report from the Netherlands.
President Park Geun-hye has laid out a systematic plan to enhance nuclear security worldwide. In a 4-point proposal made during her opening remarks at the Nuclear Security Summit in The Hague, the president said the international community should take an integrated approach towards nuclear security, disarmament, and non-proliferation. She referred to Washington and Moscow's initiative that turned nuclear arms materials into nuclear fuel, saying it was a prime example of turning swords into plowshares. The Korean leader then said there's a need for regional cooperation on nuclear security, such as in Northeast Asia, where 23% of the world's nuclear power plants are in operation. President Park also talked about the need for countries to share technology and experiences to level the playing field. Lastly, she said more measures are required to prevent cyber terror attacks on nuclear power plants. President Park also made a point of commending international efforts to strengthen nuclear security. She mentioned countries voluntarily allowing the International Atomic Energy Agency to inspect their nuclear material protection systems. She also voiced concern about North Korea's nuclear materials getting into the hands of terrorist organizations and nuclear safety.
지금 북한의 영변에는 많은 핵시설이 집중되어 있는데 한 건물에서 화재가 나면 체르노빌보다 더 심각한 핵 재앙으로 이어질 것이라는 지적입니다.
The South Korean leader used the opportunity to cast light on the dangers of North Korea's nuclear development program. She said a nuclear-free Korean peninsula should be the first step towards a world without nuclear arms. Choi Yu-sun, Arirang News, The Hague.
And staying in The Hague, North Korea's nuclear program was also high on the agenda of summit talks between the leaders of the United States and China in The Hague on Monday. President Barack Obama and President Xi Jinping reaffirmed that North Korea should not be in possession of nuclear weapons and promised to continue close consultations on that matter. While they did see eye to eye on the overall North Korean nuclear issue, the same cannot be said about their stances on resuming the six-party talks. Beijing wants to reopen discussions sooner rather than later, while Washington wants Pyongyang to take concrete steps towards denuclearization first before talks could resume.
Moving on, Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott will visit Korea next month for summit talks with President Park Geunhye. The presidential office of Cheongwade announced Tuesday that Abbott will arrive in Seoul on April 8th for a two-day visit. The two leaders will discuss ways to strengthen cooperation in various fields, along with the security situation on the Korean peninsula. They will also be looking to ink a free trade pact agreed upon back in December. The Chinese economy is slowing down, but don't expect that to affect Korea all that much. Korean Finance Minister Hyun Oh-seok says that the slowing Chinese economy will have a limited impact on the domestic economy. Our Hwang Ji-hye has the details.
For Korea's top economic policymaker, the slowing Chinese economy does not appear to be a major concern. During a press briefing on Tuesday, Finance Minister Hyun Oh-seok said that the slowdown in the world's second largest economy will not have a major impact on the nation's growth.
Despite the slowdown in emerging economies, export to emerging economies, including China and the ASEAN countries, have remained steady.
He pointed out that 80% of Korea's exports to China are half-finished goods, which are exported again to other nations. Hyun, however, said China's slowing growth could become a risk to the global economy, as it could negatively impact financial markets. He said the government would continue to look out for external shocks. Regarding the free trade agreement talks with China, Hyun said he sees no major obstacles ahead, especially with the leaders of the two nations having agreed to finalize trade talks by the end of this year. To push ahead with the government's plan to ease regulations, Hyun pledged to make clear the benefits of cutting down on red tape.
We will make the results of deregulation public so that people can make their own decisions on the government's plan.
Hyun also cited the importance of looking for creative ways to streamline regulations so that the government's drive to bolster corporate investment through deregulation gets a further boost. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
Well, the wheels are in motion on President Park Geun-hye's drive toward deregulation. Starting as early as May, it will no longer be illegal for individuals to renovate commercial trucks into food trucks.
And other renovations and upgrades also. The move comes 5 days after the president pledged to cut the volume of regulations by 20% over the next 2 years. Dr Kim reports.
In line with President Park Geun-hye's plan to cut regulations on business activities, it'll be legal for individuals and businesses to renovate commercial trucks into food trucks starting as early as May. The Transport Ministry made the announcement Tuesday, and it follows a request by a food truck manufacturer made during a special televised debate last week. Food trucks are currently categorized as special automobiles, and therefore it's illegal to renovate other types of trucks for the purposes of serving food on them. While it normally takes 40 days for such a change to take place, the Transport Ministry plans to expedite the process and shorten the period to 20 days. In other plans, the ministry says it'll ease regulations on the tuning of automobiles and will allow for the renovation of vans into camping cars and vehicles for the disabled by the end of this year. The move comes after President Park Geun-hye last Thursday stressed that reforming current regulatory measures would encourage businesses to invest actively, which would ultimately lead to job creation. President Park pledged to cut the volume of registered regulations to 80% of the current level by 2016. Dr Kim, Arirang News.
So Korea will cut the total number of regulations and business activities to 80% of the current level by 2016. Now, the plan was unveiled during a 7-hour marathon meeting led by President Park Geun-hye herself on national television and translates into the removal of 2,200 regulations and a drop in the total from more than 15,000 to just over 13,000.
And for a closer look at the latest pledge by the Korean government, we are joined live in the studio by Dr. Kim Inchul, Professor of International Economics at Sungkyunkwan University. Professor, thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me here.
Now, I'm sure you watched, along with many other Koreans, the marathon debate on national television led by President Park herself. There were many points of note in the 7-hour-long televised debate. Now, what's the significance of this debate, and what are some key points that we should not miss out on?
Yes, well, the 7-hour-long televised discussion was a very long session, and people easily get tired, but President Park was not, and she just kept on setting up so long a time, and she just was so attentive and persuasive all the time, and people could see, read, her strong determination to implement the deregulation drive and such, aggressive deregulation drive. I think she made a very good impression on the people who watched the TV.
Okay, why the level of aggressiveness in terms of the deregulation drive, and why now particularly, Professor?
Well, about a month ago, she made an announcement of the 3-year economic innovation plan, and the objective of the plan was to increase the employment rate from 65 to 70%, and increasing the potential GDP growth to 4% level, and increasing or raising the per capita GDP to the $40,000. Now, unfortunately, Korean economy seems to be in a low growth trap now, and in order to achieve these goals within 3-year period, we have really no time, and the government has to do something, and she believes, I think, taking the aggressive deregulation drive is the best way to achieve these goals she promised.
Now, Professor Kim, previous administrations, it's not that they have never carried out or tried to carry out such drives, but they were unsuccessful, obviously. Why weren't they successful?
Well, it's not quite right to say that all of their efforts were not successful. Some of them were successful, but some of them were not. I can cite a few reasons why. Some of their efforts were not successful. First of all, the package of reform, deregulation, was so complex, and the consequences of regulation or deregulation was not certain, and there are a lot of uncertainties involved, and also, most importantly, the assessment of the regulation or deregulation was not clear, and the assessment impact assessment system did not exist. So these things, because of these, one other thing is that there was not proper incentive system inside the government. So for those government officials who made a very exemplary performance in deregulation be rewarded, and those who didn't get the job done right be penalized. So this kind of incentive system they did not have, and the previous governments did not have. So these are the main bottlenecks to get to make their regulation deregulation drive successful.
Well, that's obviously not the case with this administration. We saw in the televised debate that quite a lot of ministers were in the hot seat in terms of answering the questions by private investors and whatnot.
Right, yeah. This time, I think they learned some critical lessons from the previous governments, and they tried to rectify the problems or the shortfalls that the previous governments have had before. And one of the most important the improvements or the deregulation or the regulatory reforms is that now they try to adopt the new system, more effective system. That is the UK's, one in and one out system. That is, once a new reform comes in, and the old, regulation should go out.
Right.
It's also known as the regulation cap.
From
right.
Britain there.
Yes.
So those are some of the items that we like to benchmark here in Korea, and we also like to shed some light on the very ambitious number. We have 80% deregulation on businesses by 2016. Does it sound like a feasible plan, or are we being a little bit too ambitious, or do you think we could maybe do more in that time span?
To put a limit on the number of regulations, the regulation cap is not a difficult thing to do. But what's really difficult is how to achieve, how to make this system, new system work. So that's why she wanted to take a series of other measures like the negative list approach. In other words, a regulation specifies only the activities that need to be regulated. All other activities are allowed to be implemented, and foreign investors, domestic investors can come into the areas which are not regulated or specified. So that's negative list system is very complementary. And one other thing is that all the new regulations should be subject to what they call the sunset principle. Once, say, a regulation comes to an end, with the expiration date, it should, disappear. Because previously, once regulation is born, it tends to continue indefinitely, as that is renewed and extended, on and on, and almost, permanently. So that system should be stopped, and the sunset principle is going to be assisting, these, the measures that they proposed.
Well, hopefully those that need to be deregulated will be deregulated, and those regulations that need to be in place will be kept intact. All right, Dr. Kim Inchul, thank you so much for speaking with us this evening. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.
We apologize.
We're all destroyed.
Digging deeper, getting to the bottom of stories that impact your life. talking with you on air and online, connecting you with experts on the world's most pressing issues. News and current affairs at its best, with Moon Gon-young and Daniel Che on Early Edition at 6.
Proposal for talks of holding regular reunions for families separated by the Korean War. Their reason.
A sad end and a tragic day. That was how the CEO of Malaysia Airlines framed the latest on missing Flight 370. His comments came one day after Malaysia's Prime Minister announced that the passenger jet likely met its end in the southern Indian Ocean. Our Shin Se-min reports.
This is a sad and tragic day for all of us at Malaysia Airlines. This news is clearly devastating for the families of those on board.
The CEO of Malaysia Airlines held a news conference Tuesday in Kuala Lumpur to send his condolences to the family members of the passengers and to outline steps the airline is taking for the families. The airline has offered family members $5,000 for each passenger aboard Flight 370 and additional payments as the search continues. This follows a Malaysian Prime Minister's announcement the day before that the ill-fated flight came down somewhere in the remote southern Indian Ocean with no chance of anyone surviving. Despair and rage exploded among relatives of the Chinese passengers on board that plane in Beijing after receiving the news many had feared but didn't want to believe.
I want to tell the journalists, the information they just sent, it is not true.
In a damning statement given to the media, the families accused Malaysia Airlines and the Malaysian government and military of being, quote, the real executioners who killed the missing jet passengers. They said the shameless behavior misguided and delayed the rescue actions, wasting a large quantity of human resources and materials and lost valuable time for the rescue effort. The jet vanished on March 8 with 239 people on board after it took off from Kuala Lumpur en route to Beijing. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Now back here in this country to the highly debated issue of telemedicine in Korea. The nation's cabinet passed the revised Telemedicine Act for doctors and patients earlier today despite pushbacks from the medical community. Telemedicine is clinical care that uses communication technology such as smartphones and advanced media to remove the need for face-to-face consultations between doctors and patients. While the government says the change will improve welfare services and lower medical costs, but doctors say it will diminish their quality of care, and thousands did go on strike earlier this month in protest of that. The bill now goes to the National Assembly for a vote, and the government hopes that the act will go into effect in 2015.
The Korean population is aging, so it stands to reason that age of household heads is on the rise as well. But what's more concerning is the fact that the older the head of a household, the faster the rate of increase in their spending and thus more likely to fall below the poverty line. In 1990, just 3% of household heads were in their 60s or above. That number jumped to 24% in 2012, according to a recent study by the Korea Institute for Industrial Economics and Trade. The rate at which older breadwinners spend money on everyday items like food and transportation was higher than the increase in their income. Analysts highlight the need for improving welfare services to address this growing trend.
Well, in terms of the weather, it's been a warm yet cloudy day here in Korea. But for more on the weather forecast, let's go over to our Michelle Park at the Weather Center. Good evening to you, Michelle.
Good evening, Kanyang and Daniel. It looks like the warm weather will continue, and we are about to experience some unseasonably warm spring temperatures starting tomorrow.
But with all the clouds, and of course, I can feel my joint telling me that it's going to rain.
That's right, Daniel. In fact, it's raining down in the southern region and right now, and we are expecting a nationwide rain tonight until tomorrow. And after the rain lets up, we can expect the day to clear out, making a way of highs of up to 22 degrees. Now going over to our readings. Seoul will start off the morning at 12 degrees and gets up to 22 in the afternoon. Meanwhile, the southern cities such as Daegu and Busan will both peak at 18 degrees. Now moving over to other regions, Jeju Island can expect it up to 17 degrees. Dokdo makes it up to 15 and Mangkeumgang tops out at 14. Well, that's all for now. I'm Michelle Park and have a great evening.
Thank you for that, Michelle. And that is our broadcast on this Tuesday evening. Thank you for watching. This has been Daniel Che.
And I'm Moon Gon-young. Thank you as always for being here with us. For our viewers in Korea, have a wonderful rest of the evening and a great start of the day to those of you in other parts of the world. We hope to see you right back here same time tomorrow. Bye-bye.